When you hear the words withdraw your energy, not your presence, it might sound like a contradiction at first. How can you be there and yet not be there? But this is one of the most powerful emotional moves you can make when someone has taken you for granted. See, the truth is, people don't always notice what they have when it's right in front of them, especially when your love, attention, and presence have been consistent. The moment they start to expect your energy as a given, they stop valuing it. That's human nature. And that's where this principle comes in. Withdrawing your energy doesn't mean slamming doors, cutting all ties, or vanishing into thin air. It's not a tantrum. It's not ghosting. It's deeper. It's intentional. You're still there. They can see you. They can talk to you. But they can't feel you like they used to. That warmth, that emotional effort, the eagerness in your eyes, the attention in your tone, that part. You pull back, you stop initiating conversations, you stop trying to fill awkward silences. You don't chase their validation anymore. You don't light up every time they show you crumbs of affection. You become calm, you become cool, collected. You become that version of yourself who doesn't beg, doesn't force, doesn't push for love. And that shift is loud. It shakes the energy dynamic. Suddenly they feel it. The air between you changes. The effort that used to flow from you like an open faucet is now a steady drip, measured, controlled. Why does this work? Because energy is currency. Emotional energy is valuable. And when someone has been overdrafting your account without depositing anything in return, you have every right to protect your balance. When you're fully present, constantly giving, proving, doing, chasing, they get used to the rhythm. They stop noticing the weight you carry in the relationship. But when that rhythm stops, when you're still around but no longer giving like before, that creates space, and space makes people reflect. Space makes people uncomfortable, especially if they were dependent on your energy to feel important, adored, or superior. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about punishing anyone. This is about reclaiming the energy you've been outsourcing to someone who didn't value it. It's about returning that energy to yourself, slowly, quietly, but powerfully. It's about reminding them and reminding you that your presence is not the gift, your energy is. You being in the same room isn't what kept the connection alive. It was your vibe, your glow, the way you made them feel like the center of the universe without ever asking for the same in return. And when that goes away, even if you're still sitting right next to them, the absence becomes undeniable, messes with their emotional compass. It makes them wonder, what changed? And that's when they start chasing the version of you they never appreciated. That's when the regret kicks in, because they realize they lost access to a kind of love, focus, and emotional devotion they didn't know how to hold on to. But now it's no longer available on demand. See, people remember how you made them feel, but they feel it more when you stop doing the things that made them feel special in the first place. And that's what this is all about. Withdrawing your energy sends a louder message than any words ever could. It's not a performance. It's not a warning shot. It's simply you deciding that your emotional labor, your constant proving, your eagerness to be enough, that's no longer on offer to someone who can't reciprocate. And here's the beautiful part. When you pull that energy back, you begin to see clearly. You start noticing how much effort you were putting into something that wasn't nourishing you. You recognize the imbalance you once accepted as normal. You begin to ask, why was I doing all that? Why was I trying so hard? And those questions are the gateway to healing, not because you walked away, but because you finally stopped leaking energy where it wasn't being honored. This change in energy doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, the more subtle it is, the more powerful it becomes. You don't need to announce it, you just do it. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-giving. You stop saying yes out of fear that your no might push them away. And instead, you start sitting with yourself. You start nurturing your own space. You start offering that precious energy to your growth, your peace, your next chapter. Silence is louder than begging. It carries a weight that words words never could. When you've given someone every explanation, every plea, every late night message that starts with, "Can we talk?" and still nothing changes, that's when silence becomes your sharpest and most powerful response. It's not cold. It's not cruel, it's clarity. It's you finally realizing that repeating yourself is no longer helping them understand. It's only exhausting you. Begging, in any form, always stems from the belief that someone just doesn't get it yet. That if you could just explain one more time, maybe they'll see your worth, see the pain they cause, see what they're about to lose. But the truth is, if they haven't seen it by now, they probably don't want to. Or worse, they've seen it and they still don't care enough to change. That's a hard truth to swallow, but it's also the one that sets you free. Silence, on the other hand, is a boundary. It's you choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over validation. It doesn't scream, it doesn't plead, it simply removes the energy source that was feeding the dysfunction. When you stop talking, stop defending, stop chasing, they feel it. Not always immediately, but eventually, because people become addicted to the access they're given. And once that access is gone, the absence begins to echo. See, silence forces them to sit with themselves. It removes the distraction of your voice, your tears, your explanations. There's no longer a debate to control, no message to ignore, no plea to overlook. There's just space. And in that space, reflection begins. Sometimes even guilt, sometimes clarity. And while they're sitting with all that silence, you're finally breathing. You're not waiting for a reply, not checking your phone, not rehearsing the perfect thing to say to make them care. You're not stuck in the exhausting cycle of trying to make someone feel something they should have felt from the start. Silence is uncomfortable. That's why most people avoid it. But the discomfort is what makes it effective. You see, begging puts all the power in their hands. It says, you decide, you have the control. I just want to be chosen. But silence takes your power back. It says, I'm no longer waiting for you to choose me. I'm choosing myself now. And that shift changes everything. It shifts the emotional gravity of the relationship. It forces them to confront the consequences of their choices. You're no longer the one typing paragraphs while they reply with one-liners. You're no longer explaining your worth to someone who only hears what they want. You're no longer trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You stop fighting to be seen, and in that stillness, in that restraint, you become louder than any argument, any message, any breakdown. Silence is also where you begin to heal, because when you're not busy trying to make them see your value, you begin to feel your value. You start remembering who you were before you made their opinion your mirror. You remember what peace feels like. You remember that love is supposed to be mutual, not a performance. You get reacquainted with your own voice, the one you silence just to keep them comfortable. And here's the thing. Some people only realize what they had when your energy stops filling the space. When your words stop echoing in their inbox. When the drama they once relied on for control is no longer available. That's when silence speaks the loudest. Because now they have to deal with the fact that you're no longer making it easy for them to ignore you. You're no longer playing your part in the emotional theater they created. You're no longer giving them a front row seat to your vulnerability. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop screaming into a void. It means you've learned that peace is more important than being heard by someone who was never listening in the first place. It's not a punishment. It's not manipulation. It's a declaration. I will not lose myself trying to reach someone who never tried to meet me halfway. Distance creates clarity in ways that closeness never can. When you're up close, emotionally entangled, always available, it's easy for someone to overlook your presence. They get used to you. They begin to expect you. They assume you'll always be there, answering the late night calls, replying to the dry texts, forgiving the inconsistencies. But when you create distance, not in anger, not in spite, but in calm intention, that's when everything changes. That's when people finally see what they couldn't see when you were too too close, too accessible, too present. You see, when you're always near, your presence becomes background noise. They stop tuning into it because they know it's always there. Like a song on repeat, they stop hearing the meaning in the lyrics. But the moment that song stops playing, the silence feels loud. The familiarity becomes absence. That's the shift. That's the power of distance. It removes your energy from their immediate reach and forces them to experience life without it. And that's when the truth hits. Clarity doesn't always come from conversations or conflicts. Sometimes it comes from space. From not hearing from you. From waking up and realizing there's no good morning text. From going through a tough day and knowing you're not on the other end to comfort them. From scrolling through their feed and noticing your silence. That's when they start to notice everything they took for granted. The emotional support, the small gestures, the loyalty that felt so constant it became invisible. Distance turns invisible into undeniable. It's easy for people to underestimate your worth when they haven't felt the world without it. They assume you'll keep showing up, even when they stop showing up for you. They think your forgiveness is endless, your energy infinite. But distance corrects that illusion. Distance says, I'm not angry, but I'm not available like I used to be. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply exits the emotional transaction where your effort was being misused. And the beautiful thing is, distance doesn't just bring them clarity, it brings you clarity too. Because when you step back, you start seeing the situation differently. You start noticing how much energy you were pouring into someone who barely held a cup. You see how many of your needs were left unmet while you were focused on meeting theirs. You realize how much of your identity became wrapped in being enough for someone who never knew how to receive you. Creating distance gives you the space to reconnect with yourself, to sit in silence and hear your own thoughts without their influence, to explore your feelings without needing their validation, to heal in private without reopening wounds just to stay in the loop of a relationship that was slowly draining you. Distance isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's you turning your focus inward, not because you gave up, but because you finally got tired of giving everything and receiving almost nothing. For them, the impact of your distance comes like a whisper at first. A missed text, a delayed response, a change in tone, but then it builds. Days turn into weeks, and the space between you stretches. And in that stretch, reality sets in. They realize you were never obligated to stay. You stayed because you cared. And now that you've stepped back, they start asking questions they never thought they'd ask. Why aren't they reaching out? Why do I feel their absence so heavily now? Did I really think they would never walk away? Those questions are the beginning of their clarity. That's when they start piecing it together. That's when the highlights of your presence begin to replay in their mind. Not just the big moments, but the little ones. The way you listened without judgment. The way you made them laugh when they were breaking inside. The way you always understood even when they couldn't explain. They start to miss the emotional safety you gave them. The kind of safety they thought they'd find elsewhere, but now realize was rare. Distance changes perception. It holds up a mirror to the relationship, showing what was truly there, not just for them, but for you. It's the reset button. The moment you stop reacting and start reflecting. The space where you rediscover your boundaries, your voice, your peace. Because love without respect is just noise. And distance cuts through that noise like a knife, leaving behind only what's real. Self-respect is not built in moments of comfort. It's forged in the quiet aftermath of being overlooked, unappreciated, or disrespected. When someone you deeply cared for begins to treat your loyalty like an obligation and your effort like background noise, you're presented with a choice. You can keep giving, hoping they'll notice, or you can finally choose yourself. And that moment is where real self-respect is born. Not out of pride, not out of revenge, but out of a deep realization that you were never meant to beg for love, consistency, or attention. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you didn't love them. It means you finally remembered to love yourself too. There's a different kind of power in walking away, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with a calm knowing that you deserve better. It's the kind of walk that shakes the ground they stand on because they expected you to stay. They expected your forgiveness to be infinite, your patience to have no expiration date. But when you choose yourself, you break the cycle. You stop being available for the same pain. You stop waiting for the apology that never comes. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into a space that was never built to hold your worth. People don't expect you to choose yourself when you've always chosen them. They become comfortable with the imbalance, comfortable with you always reaching out first, always being the one to fix things, always being the one to hold the weight of the relationship. But when you stop showing up in those ways, when your silence becomes louder than your efforts, it disrupts everything. It forces them to confront the reality they never had to face before, that your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. Choosing yourself is not just about walking away. Sometimes it's about staying, but setting new terms. It's about no longer bending your standards just to keep the peace. It's about speaking up when something hurts, even if your voice shakes. It's about holding space for your own emotions instead of always holding space for theirs. You become your own protector, your own advocate. You stop outsourcing your value to someone else's ability to recognize it. When you start to choose yourself, you begin to see things clearly. The moments you once romanticized now feel heavy with imbalance. The excuses you once accepted now feel like insults. You look back and realize how often you betrayed your own intuition just to keep a connection alive, how often you tolerated inconsistency in the name of love, how many times you swallowed your truth just to avoid being too much. But choosing yourself demands honesty. It requires you to face the uncomfortable truth that love alone isn't enough, not when it costs your peace, your voice, your sense of self. There's a strange kind of grief in choosing yourself too, because it means letting go of the version of the story where they finally see your worth and change. It means accepting that some people love you in the way they know how, but that doesn't mean it's the way you deserve. It means stepping into a version of life that's unfamiliar, maybe even lonely at times, but it's real, it's honest, it's yours. And the most empowering part is that the moment you choose yourself, everything changes. Your energy shifts. You stop operating from a place of lack. You stop proving, persuading, performing. You start attracting people who meet you with the same energy you give. You start aligning with relationships that feel mutual, where effort is mirrored, where respect is foundational, not optional. You no longer chase love. You embody it. And in doing so, you raise the standard for how others are allowed to treat you. They might not get it at first. They might say you changed, that you've become distant or cold. But what they're really feeling is the absence of the version of you that tolerated what should have never been normal. They're feeling the shift in power, the loss of access, the silence that now exists where your explanations used to be. And while they sit in confusion, you're sitting in clarity for the first time in a long time, because self-respect doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it simply exits the places where it's no longer honored.